Hi, this is Buzz Delano for Delano News Advance. And this week's interview coming from you live from CEDIA Services Worldwide in Clifton, New Jersey. I want to thank Gary Darman and his team for allowing myself and Keith Cottrell from the Electronic Environments of New York to be on site here while we connect with Ed Gilmore of AHT Global in New York City. So welcome, Ed. Welcome, Keith. How are you doing today?
Great to be on the show, Buzz, and thanks for having me. And hi, Keith. How you doing?
Good morning, sir. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, so for Delano News Advance, it's exciting to now do a podcast live kind of on the road and in one of my favorite places in the country, the New York Metro. Are actually doing it from New Jersey. As you guys both probably know, long ago before I was in California and now Florida, I'm originally from New Jersey, so I grew up near New York, and I've always enjoyed coming back here for all the energy and today's wild weather.
You brought it with you.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also great to always reconnect, doing business and seeing friends in our profession, such as both of you guys. So I appreciate the fact that we could spend some time together talking about the smart home AV integration business. So if take a moment or two of each of you, one of you kick it off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your businesses that are located here in the New York area.
I'll jump in first. Again, my name is Ed Gilmore. For 34 years, I ran a company called Gilmore Sound Advice. We were located on 11th Avenue in Midtown. And I started this back in the infancy of our industry, really, when there really weren't any processes and there were just a lot of aficionados actually getting into the industry. Who else was actually going to do it except for some hybrid retail shops and some guys that were super interested? I don't want to say we were all hobbyists. I think there was a little more talent involved in that and getting these businesses off the ground. But sometimes it did feel like a hobby at best. And there were imposter syndrome and dilettante status assigned variously to some people. But it was a fun time because the technology was actually slower then. Right. So the advances were a lot slower and it was a lot easier to get your feet wet in the industry when that was happening. I think right now it's everything is at warp speed. AI is changing things daily. It's very challenging, but be that as it may, I foolishly decided to start a company. Actually, I was a musician before I did this. So a classical musician turning into an integrator. I didn't think that was even a term back then. I don't know what we called ourselves. AV guys, I think was what the word was. And that's how it kind of started. And I was a one-arm paper hanger for a while and learned a lot about that, about what to do, what not to do. Being a musician, I had this innate ability to improvise my way out of trouble or into trouble. I think the latter was probably more likely. And that's a hard business lesson to learn once you start having employees and you start scaling and building a little bit. Through the years, we kept up with the technology and that kept on growing. Our reputation grew as well. And we kind of got ourselves to a point where we were decent sized players, in the landscape. Certainly there were much larger firms. Keith's current firm, Electronic Environments, was one of the behemoths in the area. And so, but it was a very collegial type of environment here in New York, which I don't think exists in other market sectors. So we grew. We opened up a showroom in Manhattan, which was an open showroom in 2014, and started down that road, which really kind of put us a little bit more in the bullseye in terms of what was happening, in the area. And we continued until this past January when we merged with AHT Global, which is a firm based, or their home base is in Miami. But we have a whole bunch of regional offices in Naples, Palm Beach, Philadelphia, New York, Aspen, LA, and 3 islands in Hawaii as well. As the global part of it is there's engineering in Colombia as well as shipyards in Germany. So much larger firm, a lot to learn and to integrate with that. And it's been a real trip doing that. But lots of lessons along the way, which I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed.
Sure.
Yeah, so my journey into Resi is a little different. My background before joining Resi was in other, I'll say, skilled trades, electronics based. Started out in elevator repair and maintenance with my dad. Did that throughout high school, summers and weekends. And then at the time, I thought I was going to school for business or accounting or finance. And my dad said, let me teach you a trade. And I've been cursing him ever since, God rest his soul. But he taught me a trade. I decided I wanted to go to school for engineering. That didn't work out. Hopped around in other, I'll say, low voltage industries between telecommunications and networking and electronic security, access control, all of that kind of stuff. And then in 97, the company I was working for in Long Island City, who is still an integrator today, they sent me out to Salt Lake City, Utah to get trained in FAST.
Oh my.
And I was bitten right? Like this was the Jetsons on steroids. I was an impressionable kid at the time. I said, I want to do this. I'm sorry I ever said that.
Intellectual honesty from
Right.
Keith today.
So in 98, I moved down to Florida, and that's when I got my start working for Jeff Hoover at Audio Advisors. And from there, and again, I knew nothing about the industry and started out in project engineering I started out as a technician, then they moved me into project engineering pretty quickly because of my security and telecom background. I didn't know AutoCAD. I didn't know anything about Resi at the time. So we were just, there's a lot of collaboration going on there. But in 2000 or 2001, I got sucked into the CEDIA machine, right? And that's when you and I met a couple years later, and I was running CEDIA education for Expo for a while. And that is really where I think my journey in this industry took off. The collaborating with folks like yourselves and just being part of something bigger and being able to bring that back into the company I was working for to help us with operational excellence and training and things of that nature. So that's where the journey started really and took off. And then when I was a dean of project management for CEDIA education, we were struggling with trying to figure out what content looked like. And so someone, it might have been Eric Bodley, introduced me or mentioned PMI and the whole PMP program. And I went down that journey thinking that I was doing research for CEDIA. And then in 2004, got my PMP, and I kind of became the godfather of project management. I think that's what everyone was calling me back then. And
we needed you. We needed that skill set in the room.
We really put some strong content together for CEDIA curriculum back then. It was based upon best practices. And so there was a lot of fun doing that as well. And working with guys like Jim Goss and Joe Wallace and other guys in the project management side, Aaron Carmack.
Oh, yes.
All of those guys that helped me put the curriculum together. It was a lot of fun doing that. And I really enjoyed bouncing around the country when we used to do CEDIA regionals and teaching there. And so, started with the 800-pound gorilla at Audio Advisors. And then when I moved back to New York, spent some time with Bob Gullo at UDG.
Yes.
And then I took some time off from the industry. About 9 or 10 years, I went to the manufacturing side. Came back through commercial AV, where I was a general manager for HB Communications for better part of a year and a half, and then COVID hit, and I got sucked right back into Resi because we know what COVID did to the commercial environment. So I've been with electronics environments now for going on 5 years, and as Ed alluded to, there's been a lot of great collaboration with Gilmore and his group, and we have very similar businesses, very similar pain points, a lot of collaboration, leveraging Ed's space for the massive showroom and awesome showroom that he has through the years. But now, 6 weeks, we're now powered by Daisy. We've become part of that national entity, and it's been really interesting and very collaborative, and it feels great to be part of, again, something bigger than yourself, right? And I think the vision is strong, and as Ed said, the technology is changing at a rapid pace, and I think our biggest challenges are keeping up not only with the employee experience but the client experience. What does that look like, and how do you service and how do you provide the concierge level service that the clients at our level require in today's market? So yeah, it's all of that intertwined with the technology that's constantly evolving. And you hire new technicians who come out of, whether it's straight out of high school or college, and they instantly want to start programming, right? And they don't want to understand or take the time to understand how cables run in a house and how signal flows throughout, and what is Resi construction and all of those things. So it's that, I think, is one of the bigger challenges, and for 25 years, the industry struggled with talent.
Yes.
I think it's heightened because of how quickly the technology changes, as Ed says, and just that mentality that I want to be a programmer, right? Pretty soon, as Ed was alluding to, with AI, programming might be a dying entity, right?
Yeah, that's
larger systems.
If you think about it, for the last 15, 20 years, people were encouraged to become coders, right? Go into coding.
right.
AI has replaced 70% of coding in the last year. I mean, that's a dead end, as far as I'm concerned. So you're absolutely right, Keith. I mean, the urge for new employees to want to just jump into the programming sense before they have any understanding of anything else that happens. I think it's one of the advantages that we had, at least that I had back in 1988 when I started, was that I did everything myself. I learned this industry like through the school of hard knocks, figuring it out, making sure I understood what was happening and taking care of the clients at the same time. And, to have that knowledge base from entry installer, wire puller, whatever it may be, to then running a company and trying to understand all that goes a really long way. You just can't jump into this industry. It's way too complex right now.
Yeah, indeed. It's interesting, both of your comments about the presence of AI and how you believe it is going to, and then Ed, you qualified it with like 70% of the programming is now being done by AI. That's actually frightening, but at the same time, there's got to be some opportunities within that shift and that change, even before we get back to personnel and technician,
Yeah.
hiring and things like that. Our industry historically, at every generation of it, and let's call, the AV installation industry or smart home profession, it's basically been around for close to 40 years. I mean, it evolved from commercial businesses, kind of, fabricating variations of product to work for residential to hide product and make, early remote controls work. So the industry's been around a long time, yet we continue to evolve no matter what the technology changes are, what the generational changes are in the world. This industry continues to move forward. So while that's going to be a big change, and like you both said, the programming and AI influence on it, change will happen rapidly. It's going to provide some opportunities to make other things happen, perhaps, hopefully, maybe more efficient. Maybe that's going to open up a little more time in your operations to do the physical work of more projects or do larger facilities. I don't know, but my point is this industry continues to evolve and grow with everything that, if you will, it either brings to itself or is kind of thrown at it by the general market.
There's one thing AI can't do, right? AI is never going to replace an electrician. It's never going to replace an HVAC person. It's never going to replace installers who take pride in their work and really want to be, expert craftsmen at what they do. That's something that AI is just not going to, it can help, but it's not going to replace. And so I think trades are essential. I think the whole shift of what's happening in terms of our educational system towards trades. I'm proud to be part of CEDIA now. I mean, Keith, you were one of the OGs, in terms of CEDIA. I came on their board 2 years ago. But one of the things that I think was really great was getting a classification for our industry from the Department of Labor. And
yes,
the thing I think is great is that we were able to have, as part of the one big beautiful bill, whatever you want to call it, the fact that the 529C is now not just for 4-year schools, but now can be applied to trade schools, which I think is essential.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just kind of going back to AI and talking about operational efficiency, that's what we're doing right now. We're leaning into, the slippery slope with AI, right? Just like any new technology, it's a shiny object, right? It's such a broad thing that you can dive into and chase rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And my mandate, we started a small little AI committee maybe about 3 months ago, I guess. And I asked them, I said, I'll let you guys run autonomously as long as you're not chasing shiny objects. I want to understand how we can, streamline our process and fix the problems that we have and get more efficient with project management, project delivery, service delivery, things of that nature. But going to the client side, I remember 20 years ago where clients were demanding, especially ones that could code, to Ed's point, that were software programmers. They wanted access to whether it was Crestron or AMX or even Lutron files, because they didn't want to have to pay us to come in and do those simple changes, whether it was a favorite button because the channel lineup changed or dimming their lights. They wanted that ability to do it. And I think with AI, that's coming fast and furious. So we're going to have to figure that out down the road in terms of, maybe not the larger systems, but certainly some of the small and medium-sized ones that become more user-friendly for clients to update as they go. And as AI gets introduced into the technology that we're selling and more mainstream there, it's going to learn just like, the entry-level AI products are in terms of, think about what Google Nest can do for an HVAC system. Right?
Of
Today,
course.
they'll just continue to learn and understand the space, and we need to get out in front of it. Right? And I think there's a huge opportunity there. But for me, it starts first with internal efficiency.
It's that internal group gone for you about focusing on AI? Do you feel like you're not just chasing the shiny object?
It's amazing the stuff that they're churning out. We're beta testing a few things like in our production environment in terms of checking the progress of building a rack, percentage of completion, what used to be a manual update for our technicians on a Friday so the PMs understood, where they were at in that stage of production. Now it's a simple AI tool that they're just, checking some boxes and it's providing that update for them. And I want to lean into it more with, progress reports that are client facing, but they're also working on, intake documents for surveys and on the service side, because we use this massive ERP system. How can we scrub the tickets in that ERP system to get service invoicing done faster? So there's some experimenting going on with that. And there are some left field things, and every now and then I could catch wind of it. I'm like, no, we're going to pause on that. It requires a lot more budget. We'll talk about that next year. But I think the fact that they're given an opportunity to really play and experiment with this, the collaboration in this, four-headed group has been amazing. And I intentionally stay out of those meetings because I get shiny object as well.
Yes, we've seen that a bit over the years. We all tend to do that in this industry, but as the businesses and you mature in your roles in your organizations and your businesses get larger and all these other things around it happens, we do have to have a more organized, professional, efficient business head amongst ourselves to run a smart home and AV company in this industry, especially in a market in the great, the New York metropolitan area, which of course is a massive market. It's an exciting market, a dynamic market. And like everywhere else, there's, clients always have high expectations and integrators want to deliver the best. But I would imagine that operating in this particular market, in this part of the country, maybe if we move a little bit more towards the operational side of your business, either daily or over a period of time, from a logistical standpoint, we could talk a little bit about that. And what I mean by that is maybe everything from what it takes to be, you're working with your vendors to making sure you're having product delivered into the marketplace, whether it's job site or your warehouses or your workspace areas, to moving around the territory for client work and projects, given the density of the market. What are your thoughts on the logistical end of running a business here?
The issues are legion, actually. I can remember back probably in the early aughts when Via Home was the rage, right? Which was really the first kind of roll up, that was happening in the industry. I remember in Denver, we were sitting having drinks with some of the VIA members, and they were saying, Manhattan's next. We're coming to New York City next. And I said, come on, bring it on. The shores of the Hudson River are littered with the carcasses of integration firms that thought they could make it here. It is very, very difficult. You have to, first thing you have to know is that you have a 6-hour day. That's the first thing, right? 6 hours. How do you maximize that? How are you efficient within that? Now, of that 6 hours, you also have to get into buildings and out of buildings, all right? And some of these buildings won't allow you to start work until 9 a.m., the earliest you can start. And they want you to start cleaning up at 3 p.m. or 3:30 because you have to be out by 4. So you're talking about really a 5-hour day, that you can get this work done. So, if you're not billing properly, if you're not thinking about that right from the get-go, you're sunk. And if you're coming in from out of town and you think you're going to be paying for parking every day on top of that, you can be paying for all this. I mean, there's a reason why some of the more successful integrators in New York never had vehicles, because we found ways of using courier services or where, messengers to get things to us. And just to have a truck to try to park it, to try to deal with it, it was insane. It was easier for us to hire a courier service to bring our racks to job sites and have my guys being efficient there already waiting for them, rather than having 3 guys trying to navigate getting down into a service entry, which can involve steps, can involve a whole lot of things. New York is not that friendly in terms of, getting in and out of buildings to begin with. And then you work in some of the, the real premier buildings like 432 Park or anything in Hudson Yard. You can be waiting for an hour to get onto an elevator. So these are things that just kill efficiency, kill profit margins, kill things. So you got to learn, you have to be nimble, and you have to really plan, or else you're going to lose your shirt very quickly.
Okay, your comment about you only have a 6-hour day, I wouldn't say it caught me off guard, but it made me think about it. And my first thought was, okay, well, does that mean they're starting later and wrapping up earlier? And that's fundamentally what it was. While I've never been an integrator, I've certainly been in the trade a long time. I never really thought of that. So I found that's a real fascinating, bit of information that you presented there, how short the day actually becomes due to all these issues that are almost unique in New York.
I mean, if you go outside of New York and you go just like this, we do work up north, we call it up north, it's quaint. But if you're doing work like in Dutchess County or any place like that, guys are showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're leaving at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon. That's a full day, they're working.
Right.
We don't get that up.
We don't get that opportunity. And then, we're beholden most cases, right, to mass transit, right?
Yes.
We have a lot of staff that lives in New Jersey. New Jersey Transit, once a week, especially in weather like this.
Of course.
It's a crapshoot if the guys can get into the city on time. And then, for service guys that are, bouncing around from job site to job site, right? They're typically riding a bus or a train. So occasionally they'll jump in an Uber if it's convenient. But to Ed's point, it takes a mastermind of just getting people and goods where they need to be. We're fortunate. I brought on a logistics manager maybe about 4 years ago now, going on 4 years, and he ran large warehouses in the city. And so he's helped. If the planning is there from the project side, you can mitigate your delivery costs. In New York City, you've got a company like New York Minute that's sitting on the corner just waiting to deliver something. There's a premium for that, right? On the spot. And so trying to mitigate that in terms of planning ahead and when getting racks and other, goods delivered is part of the whole project plan. But then in today's, specifically over the last 2 to 3 years, all projects slip. There isn't a construction schedule or a production schedule that has been accurate, since before COVID. And
Right.
it wasn't even that good before COVID, but it
Right.
seems to have gotten a lot worse. So projects continue to slide, and so the warehouse starts, stacking up. You want to get racks out the door, and we've got racks sometimes that we're done building, and they sit for 3 months.
Because you do all your rack building on site in your
in-house.
workspace.
Yep.
Do you do that as well, Ed?
Yeah, offsite, never on site, right?
Yeah,
Everything's
at your workspace in your location.
It had been done here. We're now in the process of converting our workspace into more showroom right now, because AHT has a different kind of bent on this whole thing. They have such a process for rack building that they build everything in Miami and ship. It's pretty remarkable.
Interesting.
But their team is so tight, you know what I mean? And of course, it comes from the whole concept of rack building for mega yachts, right? So the processes that are involved and redundancies and all the things that are part of that project are then imported into the residential systems, because it doesn't matter if you're floating in the middle of the ocean or you have a project in wherever in the country, you have to make sure it's working all the time. And so that process and those people, those skilled laborers that are down there do that faster than anybody, and it's always comes out beautifully. It's a magnificent product.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So as much as we like to say we're great at building and different things, you get humbled pretty quickly when you see what people are capable of doing.
Right. Well, I'd imagine if the rack building is either in the process already relocated to AHT, headquarters in Miami for you, that does open up more available space in your New York location. I know you're doing some renovation of more, if you will, a showroom for that.
Yeah.
Does that also mean that your inventory is, for the most part, going to be in Miami based?
No, because we have facilities in Long Island, and we have now another facility in New Jersey, which is 25 minutes out of Manhattan. So, and that particular acquisition, if you will, recently happened. And so we're super excited also about the talent that acquisition brings in for us as well. So we have a large facility out in Jersey that now we're changing everything. And that in itself, like the integration, we'll get into this probably another time, but integrating companies into one unified company it's a lot harder than you think it is. It's pretty tricky.
But it's interesting to me, fascinating, and I actually am quite excited for our profession in general, but for the two of in particular. So here are two very substantial businesses in the kind of market we're talking about that are already enjoying, even though it's a lot of extra work, especially in the transitions from previous ownership into these other groups you're with now, the fact that you're seeing some opportunities to really build your efficiencies, really build your processes and your systems, everything from how you're managing staff, how you're working with staff on site, moving around the territory, managing inventory at different locations. These are the type of things that I think are going to really help our profession mature. So more businesses, due respect to the thousands of integrators that are successful, with more businesses operating, if you will, with greater structure than just as, hobbyists and small businesses. I think it's going to, hopefully, it's going to promote our profession to, more consumer awareness at any given level of, wealth and income and based on the system. So if more businesses operate really efficiently, more professionally, there should be some good opportunities to talk about this trade that way. And you should be able to hopefully, take on more work and have the systems in place to do that. It's interesting to me, AHT, is expanding, as you talked about earlier, Ed, with your location, and of course the folks at Daisy expanding and coming into our trade. I see both things being really helpful to this profession.
It's rising tide, right? I think
yes,
there's a lot that goes into, as Ed said, integrating, right? Especially companies like Gilmore Sound Advice and electronic environments that have been around for 3+ decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's first of all, it takes a lot of humility to understand, and there's I think often a void of humility in this industry, but that's a different conversation. But there's a lot that goes into understanding where you need the help,
mm-hmm.
right? And what your strengths are, or what got you here, but the weaknesses are what holds you back, right? And it's all about scalability as well, right? And being able to be agile in a world that's constantly moving, whether it's the technology, whether it's project sliding, whether it's the sales pipeline, getting gobbled up by ever-changing market conditions. But I think the economy of scale and being able to think beyond what's just part of your little ecosystem of electronic environments to say, where can I get help for whether it's finance or, is there an opportunity to centralize rack fab, right? Engineering services and accounting services and, even purchasing, right? For that, right? And just trying to get it all intertwined, that's the beast, right? But I think when you pause long enough to figure it out and you realize that you can't take on every single thing that you want to change today, go after the weakest link and figure out, who else can help you. And that's the one thing that's always been great about the CEDIA community is there's always someone willing to help.
Yes.
Right. Even competitors helping each other for the most part, right? Sharing job descriptions and business plans through the years and things like that. But being able to collaborate with people, when I first joined Electronic Environments, for like the first 6 months, I was laughing at everyone. And Kim Michaels, the owner of the company, founder of the company, said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Do you really think this is unique to Electronic Environments?" Right? It's no different in the commercial world. It's no different in a larger company. It's no different for a company in Montana who's got to drive for 2 hours to get to a job site. It's just, you're so close. There's like writing a novel. You got to get away from it and realize that it's, take a breath and let's go after the challenges that we can solve and recognize the ones that it's a big climb up Mount Everest to solve those issues. So there's a lot to it. And think about it. This industry is as old as we think it is still relatively new.
Yes.
Right. Learning how to run a business, how to do proper marketing, as you said before, getting that consumer awareness where it needs to be, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a big roadblock in terms of holding this industry back.
Yeah, it's definitely an opportunity for the trade as a whole to have more consumer awareness, really whatever that means. But I think we can get there. So one more thing maybe to spend a little bit of time on before we wrap it up and let you guys get to your day, whether it's a 5-hour day or a 15-hour day.
Well, my days are 16-hour days, so I don't know.
However it sorts out, yes. What are your thoughts on your business and how things look in the coming months? I guess the combination of wrapping up at least the calendar year and, of course, however the holiday effect, has on your business and what 26 looks like. Any thoughts there?
What I'm sensing and what I'm beginning to see right now is a little bit of reluctance. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. Uncertainty breeds, and for our industry, is tough, right? Because let's face it, these budgets are discretionary, right? And for a lot of these people, they don't have to do what other people do. They're at a different strata. So it really, everything that they're building a 30,000 square foot house, right? And it's a third property or a fourth property. They can hold off on that for, 6 months or a year until they see things stabilize a little bit. So for people in our strata, I think that we're starting to see a little bit of holding back. Let's see what's happening. Not really seeing, a tremendous amount of aggressive VEing going on, right now, although that's always been something that pops up from time to time. But we are seeing multiple bids, a lot more multiple bidding going out. So we're seeing a lot more designing, design service agreements going out, and then that going out for bid. So there's a little bit more caution that's happening right now. But I'm a little, we've had a really good year and we will hit our target, which is always encouraging that we can do that.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that everybody, one thing that's amazing about AHT is the amount of communication that goes on with that topic. But the other thing that's super important, I think that, when you start to dig in your heels, when you start to see new opportunities begin to drag a little bit, is that you mind what is the most important. And the most important thing is your existing client base and your service. That is really what generates that lifeblood, of capital coming into your company, and also the trust. And that's where you get your referrals from. So everything is a sale, and everything's a sales opportunity, and service is a sales opportunity. And I think a lot of people haven't really come to grips with that. I've always felt that way. I always felt like we were never in, I was an integrator. No, actually, I'm in the service industry. That's what I do, right? I support our clients. And I think that, when times start to get a little bit uncertain and people are a little bit reluctant to pull the trigger on those big ticket purchases that they're going to make, that you go back and you mine your existing clients and you deal with that. And that's a really great way to survive.
Yeah, I can't echo that enough. I think, we've seen a lot of uncertainty 4 or 5 years, between rebounding from COVID and then supply chain issues that we saw in 2022.
And now, right?
Yeah, seen it again.
Are you
now.
really?
I mean, it's crazy. Conversations recently about COI, getting this tickets and not having product for lighting control coming in. It's a problem. It's been,
the last, presidential election cycle, that really put a lot of uncertainty in terms of, again, I talked about project sliding, but I've seen the sales pipeline ebb and flow, with market conditions. And I think to Ed's point, that when we started this initiative maybe 2 years ago ourselves, and it's a founding principle of what Daisy's trying to do as well, which is huge synergy there, is reaching back out to existing client base, right? And it's a captured client. It's an opportunity not only to reconnect and figure out what's changed in their lifestyle relative to the system that you sold them, 10, 15 years ago, right? And maybe they're empty nesters now. They don't need that level of technology or technology they're not even using anymore, right? But it also reduces the burden on your desk, on your service desk, right? In terms of putting Band-Aids on these systems, trying to keep them going. I wouldn't say forcing upgrades, but strongly encouraging upgrades, right? And then building in packages that have recurring maintenance and system health checks, especially with the clients that we have that have multiple homes, connecting before the holidays. What house are you going to be in for the holidays? Is it, where are you going to be for Thanksgiving? Where are you going to be for Christmas? Is it the Hamptons? Is it New York City? Is it elsewhere? Where do you want to focus to be so that when you get there, the system is primed and ready for you, right? That's the goodwill that Ed talks about. And, I can't emphasize enough I hate to use the word burden, but being part of a service team, it's a thankless job, right?
Right.
And they're not calling you to say thank you. They're calling to complain about something. So the more that you can get out in front of that on a proactive basis can change the tide of your client base and also your employee morale. So being part of fixing something before it breaks and understanding how to get out in front of that and just connecting at a different level. What does that mean from account management? Is it only the salesperson's responsibility or is service involved? And
right.
If you have enough RMR, can you hire someone to do, concierge level service? It's responsible customer follow-up. Those are the things that I'm thinking about right now as we navigate the market, but also leverage what Daisy's already have in play, what they want to do.
I think service is really interesting. For a long time, the reason why people are into service is because there was this RMR kind of fascination that was happening, right? How can you increase your RMR? In reality, it's putting a tourniquet, right? Tourniquet on just bleeding your company in service, right? So if you think about service just as, I want to take care of my clients, but then you got to go backwards. You have to kind of reverse engineer this. So how do you lessen the burden on your service team? How do you work with only best-in-class product to make sure that you're going to have that support from the manufacturer, you're going to have that support, you have the standards and the processes to make sure that the documentation is complete. So the service guy isn't out there twisting, in the wind, figure out how somebody else, put the system together. So when you start kind of going back from the point of, going back to that client and because they have a problem and we're going to resolve this problem quickly, all the different processes from the sales, from the initial sales all the way through come into play. And so you have to review all those processes all the time, make them better, get them tighter. Those are discussions that are really kind of exciting to have in a way, because you can change and improve. And that's what we have to do to keep on moving forward. It's like a Woody Allen quote about a shark. A shark's got to move to live, right? These businesses have to keep on evolving and moving or they're going to die. It's very quick when it happens. So
yeah, the opportunities are going to fly right by you as fast as things are changing. Opportunities can be missed if you are not ready to evolve and structure the business to be able to do that. Well, that's interesting. We've certainly touched on a lot of really valuable points here, and I can see us getting together again sometime in the future to go a little deeper either on some of this or maybe some of the other things we spoke about. But it's really great to have both of you with us today, especially with not only the longevity of your experience in our industry, in this business, everything operational, technology, staffing, client relationships, and satisfaction, working in a large market, but between all three of us actually, but especially the two of you, have really been very active in our industry, in our profession. CEDIA committees, CEDIA boards, I've done a lot of that work too. I think it's really important, and I'm sure it exists in every profession, but because we're basically in this trade, it's really rewarding to see that no matter how all the generations change and the years pass by, our industry has always had really passionate volunteers who are business leaders and business owners in the trade, whether we're integrators, manufacturer, consultants, folks such as myself, many other vendor and manufacturer people, manufacturers, reps, and all across the industry with different skill sets, really wanting to make sure our industry grows. Keith said earlier, all ships rise. And that's always been a very rewarding characteristic of this industry to me, to see that no matter what changes, there's always people that really care and want to see the whole thing grow. And I think that's contributed to the fact that over the years, we've had investment come into our trade. We all know here that a lot of distributors have been rolled up by larger companies. Some manufacturers have had that occur to them with them for different reasons. And there's been other, if you will, roll-ups and acquisitions of integration companies. And then, exciting to see a company like AHT that's squarely in our space over the last number of years, expand to different markets, such as New York, with your team, Ed, and Keith, with EE being a longtime business and becoming part of Daisy, which is a whole different approach to investing in our profession. I see the fact that there's larger entities that want to invest in this profession as a very, very good sign. Yeah, it's changed and it can be scary to some people, but I think it's a good indicator that this is a valuable profession and one that provides good business opportunities and puts businesses like yourselves in a stronger position to deliver a great customer experience. And like you both said, that's really what, where it meets it. That's where the work happens. That's where the revenue comes from to keep this thing going, is your relationship with the client, whether it's in one location, multiple homes, multiple cities, countries in some cases, big family, small family. So client relationships are certainly key. Maybe that's something we'll talk about in the future. So before we wrap, let everybody get on. Anything else you guys think of?
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, again, I took 9 or 10 years off from the industry, but I'm excited because I think, when I think back to, again, the work that we were doing when CEDIA University was a thing, right? And we were trying to figure out how to get certification and university aligned and talking to trade schools. And it's no different today, but I think that the industry is finally ready for that, right? There's been a lot of great visionary work done. We're still a relatively young industry, and I really am looking forward to, as much as it burns us out, it's
Yes.
a love-hate relationship most of us have with the industry. We do it for a reason. Some of us have therapists for those reasons, but at the end of the day, I think it's really exciting, and it's not going away, right?
No.
I think more and more of the smart home concept is becoming a reality, right? And it's not just about the systems that you sell, but as we already kind of nailed, it's about the service that you provide and the expectation of, I need it to work when I want to use it, right? And there's a lot of smart people in this industry, and there's a lot of collaboration going on at a much different level, even in the buying groups. As a former board member, and stuff that I've seen, and
Yes.
things of that nature. Even the buying groups are starting to collaborate to try to work through some of these issues beyond just buying product, right?
That's
Training
important. That's
and
great.
business practices and things of that nature. So I'm excited, and I think I think the next 5 years are going to be telling for the industry, and AI being part of that, but everything else, as you said, investing in the industry and the talent and getting, the foundation whole again is important.
I think the holy grail has always been to provide an experience for our client, to provide a great experience for our client. And I think that we're on the cusp of realizing that promise of simplicity, of reliability, and having an experience, a repeatable experience that clients value and can align to, so that finally we can try to pull ourselves out of this kind of constant descent, into this. I don't even want to know what that's called, but there is no middle anymore, right? There's entry level and there's luxury. And so the middle is completely hollowed out. So where are we going to go? What's the direction? What can we as integrators, what kind of service can we provide? What kind of experience can we provide to that client, right? To warrant their trust in us and to warrant really paying us to have that experience. This isn't something new. This is something we've been working on for 40 years, right? But it's very clear right now in terms of the lines that are in the sand, in terms of how we need to get there and how we need to perform and behave. And I'm excited for it too. I think this is going to be an amazing next decade of technology.
Well, that's great to hear. Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a really insightful, intellectual, and entertaining and informative conversation. Exactly what I was hoping for and expect. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to share thoughts on your businesses, and the fact, in some ways you compete because you're both in the New York area, but you know how this industry works, and it's good to share information to a certain point. So I appreciate the fact that I could have such a great pair of experienced industry business leaders here at Delano News Advance. And of course, appreciate the friendship I've had with both of you for years and years, and hopefully many more to come. So I want to thank you again for the time and wish you well today and every day for the rest of the year. And then we'll carry into next year and all the success of the next 5 and 10 years like we're predicting. Let's make it happen. I think it's going to. So Ed, have a good day. Keith and I are going to sign off here from, thanks to our host, Media Services Worldwide.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
A huge thank you to Gary Darvin and the team at Media Services Worldwide in Clifton, New Jersey for hosting Delano News Advance with Keith Cottrell and Ed Gilmore.